Jonathan Clarke here on Canadian Pro Wrestling Radio. The man just put out his second book, and now he joins us on the show, and I'm very fortunate to welcome a legend in the wrestling business, the $1 Million Man, Ted Dibiase. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, man. It's good to be with you.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your day. You're a very busy man, and it's a pleasure to have you here. You just recently put out your second book. Your first one was called Everyone Has a Price, and your second one is called Ted Dibiase, the $1 Million Man. What made you want to write a second book?
Well, I had a lot of people, a lot of fans who had read the first book and realized that the first book was more about my personal spiritual life and journey than it was about my wrestling career, although there were some things about my wrestling career in there. And a lot of fans just basically voiced an interest in hearing more about my career in wrestling. And so the WWE now has a program they call the Legends Program, and I'm a part of that program. And through that program, they said, Ted, you know, your action figures are one of our biggest sellers. So why don't we do another book? And I said, great. I said, I've had a lot of people asking me, and so we did another book.
Right. So you had kind of like a Legends deal, and you had a action figure. What was it like having your own Legend action figure added to that series? Do you feel immortalized to that action figure?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that's funny. With the action figures, I tell everybody, I said, well, you can still go out and buy a Ted DiBiase $1 Million Man action figure. It's called the Classic Series, which means I'm old, and everybody gets a good laugh out of that. Actually, they just keep making them. I mean, it's like they have. They made a big one. They made one by itself. They made one with just the wrestling trunks, and then another one with the suit on, and then one with then another package with me and Virgil, and then I'm venturing to guess that in the not too distant future there will be another packaged action figures of Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, and Ted DiBiase, Priceless. So we'll see.
Great stuff, and I believe you're also going to be in the Legends of WrestleMania video game. I know you were in one of the most recent WWE video games too, so you're in video games as well now, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, well, you know, it's an amazing thing where wrestling has gone to. The marketing skills of the WWE and Vince McMahon are tremendous. Matter of fact, I've had a lot of people approach me that have marketing is their niche. You know, they've gone to school and they've got college degrees in marketing, and they've all said that an illustration of great marketing that all these professors use is the WWE.
Great.
So it's just exciting to see just how far our business has come. I mean, the company now has its own movie production company as well as wrestling. The athletes today they're better paid. They don't have to work as long, and I don't get that wrong. I'm not. There's no sour grapes with Ted. I'm happy for my son. I'm happy for the industry. I'm happy to see the kids doing what they're doing today, and I'm proud to be a part of what helped it get there.
Great stuff, and you were trained by Terry Funk and Dory Funk Jr. What was that experience like, being trained?
Well, I was trained by a lot of guys, to be honest with you. Okay. Terry Funk is really my mentor. I had a lot of ring experience with Dory Jr. And I had some great matches with him. He was a great technician. But the mentor in terms of my wrestling career, the guy who I always ultimately went to if I had a question or was making a career decision, was Terry. And but other guys that are in that same mix, guys that I learned a lot from in the wrestling industry, were Harley Race, Cowboy Bill Watts, who really was my boss for the better part of the first 12 years of my career. I traveled a lot in those years before 1987, before I went to the WWF, which is now the WWE. I traveled a lot, but primarily the most of those years were spent in Mid-South with Bill Watts. And Bill Watts is a guy who is no longer in our industry, but I mean, it needs to be known that this guy was one of the brightest guys. I mean, I have people come up to me even today and go, "Wow, Mid-South Wrestling," you know. If you look at all of the guys that came out of Mid-South that ended up being WWF stars, I mean, you know, Junkyard Dog, myself, Paul Orndorff, Jake the Snake, like I said, Junkyard Dog. There's a slew of them who were trained in Mid-South.
In 1975, you actually made your debut in Mid-South Wrestling and were there for a period of 4 years. Now, from what I understand, you didn't exactly like traveling the roads because Mid-South Wrestling caused you have to travel a lot. You said in the interview that you'd have to buy a brand new car once a year or something like that?
No, the first year of my career, the very first year of my career I was there, I left there, I'm trying to think, sometime in 76, the summer of 76. I went there in the summer of 75. At the end of the summer of 76, I left Mid-South, and I went back to Amarillo, Texas. I made my first trip to Japan, and then I ultimately ended up going back there again. And yes, the trips were grueling. I mean, I bought a car I bought a 1975 Ford Gran Torino, and 2 years later, I had over 85,000 miles on that car and had to trade it in, and I got a 77 Thunderbird. 2 years after that, I bought another car. In 79, I believe in 79, I bought a Buick Electra, you know, and then again, 2 more years went by, and then I went sporty, and I got a Trans Am. But I mean, yeah, we put on all these miles. I mean, the miles were unbelievable. I mean, we put on thousands of miles in a week.
Yeah, and you got to keep up with the times, really. And you actually did some stuff for the World Wrestling Federation. Before we get into that, what was that experience like working in Japan? How did you find Japan different from America?
Japan was much different, especially when I first went over there, because the culture is different, and you know, in America, you're used to fans that are you know, vocal. They're into it. They're yelling, they're screaming, they're clapping. And in Japan, when you would have a match there, it was like almost like dead silent. And then if something spectacular happened, then you would get a very light, polite applause. And it was just really strange. And it was just different. And as time went on, though, the crowds there have become much more like American crowds. But back there in the early days, it was very noticeably different.
Great stuff indeed. You actually were awarded the North American Championship, and you feuded with Pat Patterson, and he won that match, and he unified it after and made it the Intercontinental Championship. What do you believe is the reason the North American Championship didn't stay around as long as it could have?
Well, when I came into the WWF the first time, which was in 1979, I was working for Vince McMahon Sr., and Vince Jr. was an announcer working for his dad. And he brought me in, and he said, "We're going to bring you in, and we're going to do something we've never done. We're going to bring in a new champion." They introduced me as the North American champion. In other words, up until that time, the WWF, they had the WWF World Heavyweight Champion, and they had the WWF World Tag Team Champions. Those were the only belts in the WWF. And when I came in 79, they introduced me as the North American champion. Well, somewhere along the way there, I told Vince McMahon Sr., I said, "Vince, I just thought you would, it'd be a good thing to let you know that in Mid-South, down in Louisiana and Arkansas, Mississippi, in Mid-South, their champion in Mid-South is called the North American champion." Well, he wasn't aware of that. So what he did, because he didn't want to step on toes, or he didn't want to, have two belts that were the same, when Pat Patterson came in was getting ready to make his run with then champion Bob Backlund. Well, then we had a match on television, and he beat me for the North American title. And then they just made up a story. They said that Pat Patterson went off to Rio de Janeiro and entered a contest, and basically he put up his belt, and all these other wrestlers put up their titles, and it became, the winner of the tournament would be declared the Intercontinental Champion. And so that's how the Intercontinental Champion started. So I know I laugh all the time, and I tell Pat, Pat Patterson gets credit for being the first Intercontinental Champion, and in reality, the first guy was me. But it was, but he was the first Intercontinental Champion. But there, for that brief period of time, there was the guy who actually introduced a new title to the WWF was me.
Right. Did you get a chance to see the new DVD they put out? I think it's 4 discs, the Best of the Intercontinental Championship.
No, I haven't.
I'd imagine there's a bit of footage in there about you and different things. Do you think it's a great way for the WWE to celebrate the Intercontinental Championship by releasing this DVD? I don't think the Intercontinental title is defended as much as it was back in the the 80s and what have you.
Yeah, it doesn't have the stature today as it did, in my opinion. But that could all change.
What do you think the reason is that it's not defended as much as it could be?
Well, I don't know that it's today you got, the face of the industry's changed to where, the WWE now has, 3 brands. I mean, there's Raw, SmackDown, and ECW, and each one of those has its champion. I mean, you have an ECW champion, you have the WWE champion, and you have the World Heavyweight Champion. So those three titles, basically, in my opinion, eclipse. And then you have the WWE Tag Team Champions, and then you have the World Tag Team Champions.
Right.
So you got a lot of titles in the WWE. So with all those titles coming into play, I think I think it devalues to some degree, that title. And to me, oftentimes it's not the title, but it's the guy who makes the title. In other words, I think if the right guy wins the Intercontinental title and carries it well, it'll mean more.
Right. You got a total of 8 titles.